Okay, well, welcome everybody. Tonight's social distance learning is brought to you by the Liberal Gun Club, and our man with the hammer is going to be showing us casting a chamber. This is currently being streamed out of Zoom to Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. We can't stream to YouTube because YouTube doesn't like it when you handle live firearms on a live stream. It will be put up on YouTube later when our friend Kronk decides to go through and edit it and make it all nice and pretty looking and sounding. So everyone knows, all participants but the moderators and the presenter have their video shut off and are muted. If there are questions, please put them in the Discord Q&A channel or inside the Zoom chat. We have several people watching for questions at the various locations, but the easiest way to get your questions answered is to become a member and sign into Zoom so you can ask your questions live in chat. It's inexpensive. It's only about $10 a year, or you can pick more expensive ones if you'd like. And it also brings other benefits with it. Feel free to join us in Discord after our SDL shenanigans. We usually have some fun there in pub chat. The link to Discord is now in the Zoom chat. And now, Scott, take it away.
All right. Well, my friend and fellow club member, John, loaned me this gun. He was going to do it and then found out I was going to do it and conned me into doing it for him. So it worked out really well. It's an old Dutch Beaumont rifle from 1871, I believe. This one is stamped. I can't remember where the stamping is, but I think it's 1878. But it's a really interesting old rifle. I'd love to show it to you, maybe in another video. I have this thing taken completely apart because I didn't want to risk getting molten bismuth all over the wood or getting into places where it doesn't need to be. I'm more worried about ruining the wood stock than anything else. It shouldn't be a problem, but tonight, apparently these were made in two different calibers. Most of them are one particular caliber, which is 43 Beaumont, which we suspect that's what this is, but we want to make sure. And the only way to really make sure is to cast the chamber. And this can be done on any firearm, really. If you have an old revolver or something that isn't stamped, sometimes people rebarrel guns or rechamber them and don't mark the outside. Normally, you're supposed to mark the barrel somehow, engraving it or stamping it with whatever the caliber is, but that doesn't always happen, especially if it was done in somebody's shop or garage. So it's always good to figure out what the right caliber is to shoot through these guns, especially these really old ones, because some of these black powder barrels are not going to stand up to modern smokeless powder. There's a different pressure spike and bad things can happen if you run the wrong ammo through them. So this is a pretty safe and effective way to determine the caliber, and it's not expensive. I'm using, there's a product from Brownells called SeroSafe. This is just straight up bismuth. It is an alloy, but I'm not sure what it's mixed with. Maybe a little bit of tin or something. But it's got a really low melting point, and it's really good for this purpose. It doesn't stick to the metal, which is nice because you don't want to have to be trying to clean this off of the inside of the chamber or anywhere in the barrel of the gun. And I bought this, I think from Amazon. It's like $20 for a pound of it. And this is about a half of the brick, and then this is the other half. And it can be used over and over again. It's not a one-time use thing. You just throw it all back in the pot and remelt it, and then you can skim some of if it gets debris in it, I'll show you. You can skim that off the top. I think it's called dross is what they call the stuff that floats to the surface. That isn't bismuth. It's just all the crud that gets on it after a while. I know this. I'm sorry about this glare. It's really flashing off of this bismuth. But so the way to do this is I have this. This is just an old ladle that I just bent in, and I have it in a vise so it just stays up off the bench. And I just take a propane torch, which is just, this just using propane. You don't need a really hot torch like MAP gas or anything like that. This is just straight up propane for you could use the Coleman lantern cans or whatever. And this is just a cheap old torch tip from Ace Hardware. I used to use them all the time for sweating copper pipes, but they're cheap. You can get the whole setup for like $15. So for about $45, you could cast, I don't know, however many chambers you need. So the other thing you're going to need is some oil, just some gun oil or just a cheap light oil, a couple of patches. And I use a brass rod because we're going to have to tap this plug out when we're done. And I use brass because it's a sacrificial metal and it won't scrape up the inside of the barrel. It will scratch before the steel will. And the rifling can be fairly delicate. So I want to be careful with that. Something else to look out for is what we're going to do is plug this barrel right after the chamber. And we're going to fill it up with this molten bismuth and let it cool. And I suspect these are like overpressure relief cuts here. A lot of guns have these just in case, an out of battery detonation or something like that. The pressure has some place to go instead of just slamming the bolt back or blowing the receiver to pieces. So on some guns, what happens is you go to fill this up and then it fills up these little holes and makes a kind of a spur that gets stuck in here that makes it really hard to get the plug out. So what you would do in that case is plug this up with like a toothpick or shove a piece of patch down there to block it, because otherwise you would have these two legs that would come in here and really make it difficult to drive that plug out. My old Enfield is that way. So you either have to fill it low enough to not get it in there, which I don't think would give you an accurate casting, or plug them up. Or, what you can do if you forget about it is take the torch and lightly heat up these two spots and get it to melt out of there. But just a warning, keep an eye out for something like that. But so this is the receiver, and let's see if I can get where you can see down. You can see the chamber right here. And we've checked it. It's not obstructed. There's nothing else going on in here. This is also another good way to remove or diagnose chamber problems. If you've got rounds that aren't seating all the way in battery, even on a pistol barrel, you can cast the chamber with this stuff and then pull it out, and you've got an exact molding or model of what's going on in your chamber. And you can see if there's brass buildup. It will remove like a brass ring. If something gets lodged in here, it will remove a lot of that stuff. So it's a good diagnostic tool as well as
Scott, I think we might have lost you since you just went out. Will one of the other co-hosts unmute? Oh,
you got me?
Yep, you're back now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, I was just saying that it's a handy skill to have, in your arsenal, and it's not expensive to keep a little block of this stuff around. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to show you how to do it. It won't take long. This won't be one of my normal hour-long presentations and drivel. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take the chamber, and I have some cheap gun oil. I've got a case of this stuff just for this kind of thing. You don't want to use your best stuff. So I'm just going to spray it down the chamber, and because I just want to create a non-stick surface for the metal. It shouldn't stick anyway, but this is just a little added insurance to make sure. So I give it a fairly liberal coating of oil. And then I take a patch, just a regular old gun patch, and I oil that up. There's some oil on that. Make sure it's good and soaked. I fold it up, and all we're doing is creating a stopping point here for where we want the casting material to go, just as far as we want it to go in. Now let me find my brass rod. Be right back. Okay, so I have a brass rod. It's just a section of a cleaning rod. And I'm going to take this and poke that patch down as far as I think it needs to be. Might need to put another one in there because that one didn't block it up. This is a fairly big bore. So am I, though. I'm a pretty big bore. Dad jokes there. That's a little better. I want to make sure I'm down, like, see if you can see in there. You can see where the end of the chamber is, or the beginning of the rifling. This is also another way, if you want to melt enough material, you could push your plug down further and pick up the beginning of the rifling if you wanted to see what that looked like. In fact, maybe we'll do that, and it'd give you some idea of what the rifling around, how much throat erosion you have. This will give you an indication of where the barrel stands. All right, so once that's done, I'm going to heat up my bismuth. And once again, just using a torch, just applying some heat directly to this ladle. You'll see it melt here pretty quickly. And this stuff will splatter if whatever doesn't get in the chamber will splatter. So I have a piece of construction paper on the ground because this stuff, I don't want to get it all over the floor and the rubber mats I have in here. It's fairly easy to get off of some things, but it sticks to some fabrics. So see how it's melting already. It's not very good video, but it's melting. It's already molten. What I like to do is get this in its liquid state here. Almost there. So that's all melted. Now I'm going to take our chamber and I'm just going to heat the metal up a little bit. We don't want to get this red hot. We just want to heat the metal up a bit. I don't want to discolor anything or ruin anything, but we're just going to heat it up. Okay, now I'm going to make sure this is all melted. Okay, shut my torch off. So now what I'm going to do is just pour that bismuth right down the chamber here. Bear with me. Set my safe. Okay. And I'm just going to pour it right in there. Hopefully I won't drip any on my hands because that would hurt. Okay, there we go. A little bit deeper than I wanted, but I don't know if you can see it in there. You see the bright silver looking color. So that should get us from the beginning of the rifling all the way to the rim of the case. And give it, so because we want to measure, if we can, that rim thickness and rim diameter, if we can get a good casting. But what we're going to do is take some calipers and we're going to measure different landmarks on the casting and then compare it to a reference guide that my friend had that contains the caliber that we suspect this is. So let me get the reference material sorted out here. So what we're using here is the hand loader's manual of cartridge conversions. There's a few of these books out there, but this is the one he has that contains the information that he needs. So we're suspecting it's 43. caliber here. Let me find the page for it. 45 Schofield. Who knew there were so many obscure and obsolete calibers? So what we're looking at here is 43 Dutch Beaumont M71/78. And we're going to come through and we're going to measure as many of these landmarks that we can and compare it to this drawing. And if it matches, we're not going to get exactly with these castings. They're not absolutely perfect, but they're very close, and they'll give you enough data to determine, if you suspected this was, say, 43 Dutch Beaumont, but you weren't sure, and it could have been, say, 30-06. By doing this, you'll know right away, looking at the casting, that it's certainly not 30-06. It will narrow it down for you. Now, where it would get tough would be if it were, say, right next to it is 425 Wesley Richards. These two cases, the measurements are a little bit different. This one doesn't have a rim on it, so that would be a good indication that it's probably not this cartridge. So you might have to do some investigating and some research to figure out what you have, but this is the way that a gunsmith would determine your caliber. So I let that cool, and it should take another minute or two, and then I'm going to knock it out. What I'm going to do is take a brass rod or a cleaning rod, just something non scratching. I have a carbon fiber cleaning rod that I like to use. It will not damage anything in there. If I could find it in this mess. Here we go. Sorry about the camera. So this is what it looks like. It's just a long rod that I'm going to I'm just going to take this, drop it down the barrel, and tap on it. And the casting should just pop right out. Of course, it won't, because I'm on camera and it never works that way. But so what I'm going to do is, sometimes you can also put a something solid on the end of this, like a jag or something, that just blunt to knock it out. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this down. The muzzle, or the muzzle end of this. Turn it over. Okay, so here's my muzzle. Got to be careful here. We can inspect the muzzle at this point and make sure that the crown looks good, and it does on this one. So I'm going to drop this straight down and just start tapping. It should pop right out. Let's see. Maybe. Do a little tap. Moving it at all. Try it again. Sometimes they're a little bit sticky. Now, when in doubt, get a bigger hammer, right? Ed was here. Insert Ed hammer jokes here. It breaks. Of course, I knew this wasn't going to be easy because I'm doing it on camera. So let me get the rod out, and I'm going to heat the chamber up just a tiny bit to loosen it. Any questions up to this point, or just mesmerized by my shenanigans?
Is when you were pouring that, it was asked, would it make sense to use a ladle with a spout on it?
Sure. Yeah, it would make sense to use something that was made for pouring. This is just an old kitchen ladle that I had, and I needed to figure out some way that I could do this in a way that could be seen on camera. So I just used the ladle and bent it. But I'm going to put a little bit of heat on the chamber just right here to loosen it up a bit. I don't know why it's stuck. I don't want it to get so hot that it melts and gives us an inaccurate reading, but just try to break the bond a little bit in there. I think maybe
Could that be because it went down too far into the rifling?
I think I went down to where the rifling starts, and I think that's probably why it's sticking in there. But I wanted to see if we could catch some of the rifling. Just heat it up a little bit. Let's try it again. Yeah, I'm sure there's better tools for doing this stuff than what I have, but I'm used to just making do. Casting. That does. All right. Put our chamber aside. Now I'm going to play hot potato with this. And here's our plug. It doesn't look like we caught much of the threads or the rifling, but maybe we can try it again. I see here, right here, I got a little bit of a melt where I think I was reheating it to get it out, but you can see, I'm gonna let that cool down for a minute. It's fairly hot, as you would imagine. And grab some calipers. I'm just using some Multitoyo calipers. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're worth it. They're pretty well made. So the first thing we can do is start measuring things. We can measure the thickness of this rim here, so we can get some idea of the thickness. And let's see. So E on here is 0.062 is what the book says. And we're right at, let's see, 0.068. So a few thousandths over, but that is not, I think that's still within the realm because it's difficult to measure here. So we're going to measure up here where the opening would be 0.4990. And let's see, we're looking at 0.484, which makes sense because, fire cartridge is going to open up a little bit, but it's close enough that it's within, I think, let's see, 0.4880. I'll try it over here. 0.4845. And 0.484. So we're right there. We're, just slightly bigger than that. So that makes sense. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the bottom of the rim here up to where this neck starts right there. I don't know if you can see that taper on there. So we're going to measure that as well as we can. And these measurements are in the book. You can move the barrel out of my way, and I'll show you what it looks like. And you can just compare to the illustration, and it makes it a lot easier to figure this stuff out. So, but you can see here, this measurement, the opening is F. So you just come over here to your reference and see what the diameter or the width of F is. And then you start measuring. So we're going to measure from the bottom of the rim of the bottom of the rim to the beginning of that neck. And so I'm going to get my best example of the rim. And this isn't the most detailed casting. Like, it's not as detailed as a cartridge where you can get much better reference points, but it's good enough. You just have to do your best. And so I'm guessing right about there. What are they saying for K? Will be 1.8. So let's see. Double check that. Okay, rim diameter, neck length, shoulder length. Oh, that's the shoulder length. All right, so now we want to G, that's what we need. Where are we at here? Shoulder diameter. Yeah, okay. I'm not understanding this. I need the measurement from the, oh, that's J. That's what I'm looking at. Okay, sorry. 1.36. That's what I need. All right. Yeah, so right up to that edge. Right there is 1.3735. That's pretty close because that's within the margin of error of just trying to determine. So that this length checks out, at least by my estimation. Of course, my friend's going to be the one to shoot the gun, so it's not my problem if I get it wrong. I'm kidding. I want to get it right. So now we need to measure H, which is the height, but we can't really determine. It's difficult here to determine from here up because we don't know where the chamber ended. And so we're going to have to skip that measurement because we really can't determine that. Let's do the base of the cartridge, which is B. And let's measure that. That's 576. So let's get our best. And okay, 5855. So that's pretty close. And that's 5650. So we're pretty close to what that base should measure out to be. Because like I said, there's imperfections in this casting, but it's getting us in the ballpark. And I strongly suspect that this is 0.43 Dutch Beaumont, just based on the data points that we have. So that's how you do it. It's pretty straightforward. And if you wanted to check the rifling, you would just you would move your plug down a little bit further and just pour more bismuth in there and then knock it out, and you will see the rifling cast in the casting itself, which is pretty neat because usually when a barrel starts to get bad, it's going to start to get bad right past the chamber where you're getting the most hot gases and the bullet is jumping out of the case, and you get throat erosion in that part. So this will tell you how much throat erosion you have or what it looks like in there. And just because it has some doesn't mean the barrel is gone. Some guns still shoot just fine, but it will give you some idea of, without a gauge, it'll give you some idea of what the status of it is. So anyway, that is a barrel casting, a chamber casting. If anybody's got any questions, I can reheat that and reuse it again if I so choose.
What's the most interesting caliber you've cast?
I haven't done that much of it. Mostly, I'm trying to think, mostly like Enfields and stuff, because a lot of people have messed around with them over the years, and you just want to make sure it's back in its factory configuration. So I'm guessing 43 Dutch Beaumont probably is my leader in the clubhouse right now until somebody brings me something weirder. But my friend that loaned me this gun is the king of weirdness, so I'm sure he will continually have weirder and more progressively arcane calibers as time goes on. In fact, I know it. So I'll show you how you clean this stuff once it gets some debris in there. Back up. Spoon works really well for this, but I don't have one out here on the bench. And sometimes it's a good idea to just redo it. If you have any doubts or if you're not happy with the casting you got, just knock it back out and redo the whole thing and do it a couple of times to reassure yourself if it worries you. But these measurements all come back within, a thousandth or two of what they're supposed to be. So I'm fairly confident saying it's the 43 Beaumont. So once that's all liquid again, you can just take any kind of a metal or a pencil will work, and you just kind of scrape it all to one side like that. You'll see the top layer skim off, and that's all stuff that isn't bismuth. It's all just dust and dirt. And see if I can show you that. See all that crud? That's just stuff it picked up in the barrel, or it could be carbon from the heating process, but it's all stuff that doesn't need to be in there. And that's how you remove it. You do the same when if you're taking range lead and wanting to cast bullets out of it, you have to clean this stuff out of it before you cast bullets with it. But it's called dross, but it's just crud that builds up in there. So that's how you clean it and reuse it. You can do that. You don't have to do it right after you use it. You can do it before you cast your next casting. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty straightforward stuff. Any more questions or criticisms or mudslinging?
Nope. No, just some comments in here about how the melting temp of this is actually less than boiling water. And your friend, as you mentioned, I think, mentioned it has the really interesting property where it shrinks when it cools, then re-expands to be the dimension it was when it was hot, which is why you can remove it from the chamber.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also nice that it doesn't really stick. It hangs up on angles and things like that, but it doesn't stick to the metal. You could probably take this whole ladle and dump it right on top of the receiver of the gun and then just pick it right off. It's not going to, after doing this, I always really clean the chamber and the barrel really well and inspect the receiver to make sure that there are no globs, because I don't want the action to get hung up on a little chunk of bismuth or something, or anything in the barrel at all. But it could jam up the bolt or something if you left it in there. So it's always a good idea to clean it out really, really well when you're done. But it's pretty easy to clean up.
So John says next time you have to get the bore so he doesn't have to slug the damn thing. And then he said, or you can do a bench doctor on slugging a bore.
Well, we could. I'd have to get a chunk of lead to pound down there and pound through there. But yeah, it might be kind of fun. I can do it on one of your guns, John. But that's what that's going to do.
He's got that covered.
Yeah. Yeah. What that's going to do is allow you to measure the rifling. So you, instead of the chamber, you take a chunk of lead, slightly larger than the diameter of the bore, and you force it down through the barrel, and it will spin like it does in very slow motion, but like a bullet, and it will allow you to measure the lands and grooves of the rifling. And you can also determine, I'm pretty sure, the twist rate of the barrel, so you get more information about what, when you start to reload, what's going to work for you and what bullets you need.